Hi, everyone. Today we're going to look at a rather strange rum, or a rum as it's called, from Croatia. And there's several reasons why I want to talk about this particular piece of work, not the least of which that it really isn't what we think it is. But as I like to point out in my review and other things, in our world, there are several different types of rum that aren't necessarily part of it. And in the house of the Lord, there are several rooms. So, why not? Let's just take a look at it. And there's some backstory here that I want to tell you about as well. Now, there are alcoholic spirits out there, and they always have been, especially in Europe, that stretch the borders of what we define as rum. And I do try to look out for them because sometimes they're indigenous cane juice rums from someplace, or they are proto rums from Asia, or the Eastern European Verschnitz and spirits of those kinds that are made in Eastern Europe in the 19th to 20th century, the most famous of which is perhaps the Verschnitz of northern Germany. And of course, there are examples like the Badl Domaci from Croatia, there's the Casino 50 from Hungary, or the Tuzimak from the Czech Republic. And they exert a certain pull to me, the way they speak to the alcoholic history of their countries, the indigenous liqueurs and their likes and so on. And they tell us something about how rum came to be the way it is now. Now, they're getting kind of rare in Europe because, of course, rum is being more rigorously defined, although some people do believe that they still have far too many loopholes for people to squeeze through. But in this particular instance, for example, the Maraska, what we have is something that calls itself a rum. Of course, that's as a consequence of the definition of rum, which this is not. I want to make that clear right up front. And they just changed the name a little bit. And it was made after 2013 when Croatia entered the European Union. Now, there's no actual references as to what is inside this thing. There is only one review that I ever found about it that was done by Wes Burgeon somewhere around 2015 on a trip that he made to Eastern Europe. And he remarked, probably correctly, that it's neutral alcohol or vodka doctored with essences, spices, flavorings, caramel. And in point of fact, there is a notation on the label itself that says pretty much the same thing. Right. And of course, it's got a cheap metal cap, which thank God it's not the old Russian style that you could never close again. So you got to finish the bottle once you drink it. But this one can close, and I've had it for a while. And in point of fact, I only ever opened it to do the original review, and I kind of took a sip on it once in a while. And of course, it doesn't call itself a rum. It calls itself a strong alcoholic drink, which tells you everything pretty much you need to know. And you could probably tell yourself this is truth in advertising. Now, I'm going to go straight to the tasting notes right away, so that you won't waste much more of your time. And I'll go into the backstory after that, so you can skip that if you're not interested, right? Okay, so 40%, right? Yep, there is quite a bit of it. It's sweet. There's just no two ways about that. There's nail polish, vanilla, salt, grapes, fleshy fruit. And it's kind of sharp and rather medicinal with sour candy, gummy bears, glue, some rather indeterminate rumminess, molasses, leather, smoke. But I mean, you get the impression that a lot of this is just additives as opposed to anything that is inherent from either barrel aging or anything else. And of course, I don't know whether this thing is aged or not. And there's some candied, minty stuff, and it's just like raw alcohol. I mean, a must have. This is absolutely not. When you taste it, yeah, no, it's a confectionery parade with cotton candy, brown sugar, a whole bunch of white chocolate. It's thin, it's sharp, it's spicy. There's actually a fairly strong hint of cherry and cranberry juice here, and a little bit of bright and olives. But, I'm reaching here for that. But there's the vanilla thing, there's the medicinal thing, and it's really not all that. And of course, it is too damn bloody sweet. So the finish, such as it is, short, sweet, easygoing, mostly white chocolate, a little bit of brine cherries, and those florals and acetones. I mean, you could kind of sort of take it after dinner, I suppose, but as a rum for somebody who knows what he's talking about, I wouldn't really recommend it. And in point of fact, I did score, and I will continue to score this just around 6 to 9 points, which is, 75 being the midpoint, and everything below that is in various levels of badness. So it's tasty enough, and knowing what it is, I could have it after dinner, I suppose, but the issue is by setting itself up as a rum or a rum. Domaci, by the way, means domestic, so it's for local consumption. I have no idea how this got to Canada. But by setting itself up as being some kind of ersatz rum, it kind of creates the expectation that it is something that it absolutely is not. And for those reasons, I think it actually fails, which is why I give it the score that I do. Okay, so that's the tasting notes and that's the score, and you can go away with that and move on. So I'm going to give you the backstory now, which is going to take up the rest of this review, and an anecdote about something that happened after I bought it. Now, this is a brand that it belongs to a company of Croatia that mostly makes fruits and walnut brandies, slivovitz, with variations on spelling, liqueurs, and of course the variations of the domestic rums, the Domacis, for which they're best known up and about Europe. The name of the company, Maraska, derives from the Maraska cherry, a type of sour Moreo cherry, the best flavors of which are supposedly grown in Dalmatia, which is part of Croatia. Brandy called maraschino, also made as a liqueur, is made from such cherry and has been a cottage industry in Dalmatia at least since the 14th century or earlier, and distilleries were established in the town of Zadar at least since the 1700s, at least so my research suggested. And over time, the three largest and best known of them were the Saljettinoli Combine, which is the oldest, founded in 1759, Luxardo, which was founded in 1821, and Vlahov in 1861. Now, while this history of maraschino as a general term for a brandy encompasses a lot of brands and companies from Zadar, aside from the three mentioned above, like I said, it was a bit of a cottage industry and a lot of little companies were making it. The one we are concerned here today is Luxardo, which was established by Giuliano Luxardo, who was an Italian, because the Dalmatian coast long had influences from across the Adriatic by Italians from the great trading entrepôts like, well, Venice. Luxardo was soon exporting maraschino to Europe, the Americas, and Asia. Their high-quality brandy, enhanced visually by hand-knitted coverings, which this doesn't have, but which was apparently a staple of the bottlings to this day. And the liqueurs won various prizes and so on, and they became quite famous for it. And Zadar itself became the city most commonly identified with the spirit as it became a little bit more famous. Now, Zadar transitioned to Yugoslavian sovereignty after World War II, after variously being part of France, Italy, and Austria. I mean, European history has really been a history of shifting borders and wars and so on. Right? And of course, during the war, it was completely bumped to shit by the Allies and the industry ceased. But after 1946, the production facilities were rebuilt, and all the remaining usable equipment which had been confiscated from the older factories from around the city, they were consolidated into a single enterprise called Maraska Company Zadar, and located at the old Maraska factory premises, which had been built in 1911. It is now the most important liqueur producer in Croatia. Now, it makes both alcoholic and non-alcoholic drinks, sweets, various promotional products, and the strong drinks category, it features things like the Empire Gin, Cosmopolitan Vodka, Royal Brandy, St. Simon's Light Rum, which is an underproof supposedly from selected Caribbean distillers, and of course the Maraska rum, this one, which I did find in Canada. And it is noted, just like some of the others, like the Tuzimak from Czechoslovakia, that it's traditionally used to prepare cakes, fruit salad, tea, and other hot drinks in winters, with, again, no source of distillate provided. So I've always thought that it was something of a column still or neutral alcohol kind of product to which everything has been added. That's pretty much all I can tell you about the rum, the company that made it, the backstory and the history and so on. So I'm just going to finish with one little comment on it. Now, I wrote this review about a year and a half ago and put it up as review number 999 on the website. But it is actually to be found in Canada. And I did pick up a bottle in some little out-of-the-way mom-and-pop liquor store that was there, and they just had the one bottle, and I was intrigued enough to buy it for the cheap pricing. It was like 25 or 26 bucks or something like that. But some months later, after I published that review, I went to another store on a hunting expedition, and I did see about 5 or 6 more bottles, and they were just like at the bottom shelf, and there was dust where a bunch of other bottles had been. So I kind of like walked up to the owner and I said, what can you tell me about this? And he said, nothing. I know nothing about the rum, but it was really crazy. I had this thing here for like about 2-3 years, and then suddenly some idiot wrote a review about it, and people just started coming in and buying. So, it's a completely useless anecdote, but I thought I'd mention it because I thought it was just too funny for words. And of course, the idiot who wrote the review just kind of like slunk out of there with his tail between his legs and didn't say a damn word, So that's the story I've got to tell you today about something that isn't quite a rum, but I thought it would be worthy of some attention if you're at all interested in this kind of thing. And that's it for today. So I'll let you go, and I hope you guys have a really good weekend, and talk to you next time. Take care, everybody. Bye-bye.